guys, welcome back to my channel. Fun video today. We are going to be ranking my concealers. This is an updated ranking video of my top 10 plus 1 bonus. I know, I always have to break the rules. Concealers, particularly with emphasis on the under eye area. If you are anyone that either has troublesome under eyes or if you're a little bit older and you find that area to be so difficult to conceal, I have got you covered today because as you will see, most of my top 5 concealers have particular emphasis on the under eye area. So this should be a fun one. I have been trying a lot of concealers out recently, so if you're curious to see how some of the new ones I've been trying fit in with some of my old favorites, that's what this video is all about. Hopefully you guys are excited about it. Before we jump into the ranking, I want to send a special welcome to any new visitors to my channel. Welcome. So glad that you found me, us, here on the internet. So happy to have you here. I hope you'll consider subscribing before you leave, and do me a favor, all of you, and give this video a thumbs up before we get into it. And with all of that out of the way, let's get to it. Alright, so as I mentioned, we're doing a top 10, but there was one concealer that I felt, actually, let's make that 2 bonus concealers that I wanted to fit into my ranking today, because I still like these concealers, but one of them is kind of being phased out or discontinued. And the other one, well, let's just get into it. Okay, coming in at number, let's just say, 2 bonus items, 12 and 11. Number 12, I'm sorry. I know some of you hate when I cheat. I just can't help myself. Number 12, I'm going with the BH Cosmetics Total Coverage Concealer. I do really like this concealer as an overall concealer. I like it for my under eye area. I like it for my entire face. I don't find it to be too heavy or cakey on my under eye area. It can definitely get there if you use too much product, but I find it to be pretty easy to use. I like the coverage. I like the consistency. The price on this is super affordable, especially when I bought it, which it was $2 because they were clearing it out. And sadly, I just went and checked and it looks like they are pretty much out of shades on their website. I'm assuming BH Cosmetics is discontinuing this concealer, which I think is so unfortunate because it has really fantastic reviews, and I agree. I really love this concealer. Not sure what's going on there, but unfortunately you probably won't be able to find a shade that matches you, but I did want to mention it because I have talked highly about this over the last 6 or 7 months, and I do really like it and still use it. For number 11, I'm going to go with this little guy right here. This is the Tip Concealer from the brand The Saem. This is a K-beauty brand. It is difficult to find this concealer. You have to order it. I ordered mine from Yes Style. They're very affordable. You can get these little tiny, there's not a lot of product inside here, but you can get these tiny little concealers for around $3 or $4. Unfortunately, they do not have a great shade range. I use the shade 1.5, which is a perfect match for me, but I think there's only a total of like 4 shades. So obviously there's going to be a lot of people that this concealer is not going to work for. I like the consistency of this one. I do like this better for a face concealer than for an under eye concealer. I find it can be a little heavy on my under eye area, but I can use it there, and I do really love it, especially on the perimeter of my face. So now let's get into my real top 10. These are my holy grail concealers that I love the very, very most. Some of them are very old favorites, and there's a couple surprises in here, you guys, that maybe are ranked differently than you maybe would have thought they would rank, or in my last ranking video. Oh my goodness, Mandy, just get to it. Okay, let's start with number 10. I'm going to go with the Milani Conceal Perfect Concealer. This is a great concealer from the drugstore. It's very easy to get your hands on. It's pretty affordable. I think this is under $10 depending on where you buy it. They do have a pretty good shade range. I like this concealer more on the perimeter of my face and on my eyelids as kind of an eyeshadow primer than I do on my under eye area. I have to be very careful with this one on my under eye area. If I use at all too much product, this one can get very heavy very quickly. It's not quite as hydrating and as thin as some of the concealers that I especially love on my under eyes. So this wouldn't be my top pick if you have dry skin or kind of more crepey under eyes, but it is a good one. I know there are a lot of people that love this concealer, and I would imagine if you have more normal to oily skin and perhaps younger skin, this might be a better match for you. I do like it, it's just I have better. Number 9, I am going with the CoverGirl TruBlend Concealer. I was really surprised that this one came in at number 9, but I just have so many good ones, you guys. It was hard to put this one lower because I do like this concealer. This I kind of feel the same way as the Milani one, but this one I feel like is a little bit more hydrating than the Milani one. Again, I do like this concealer. I like it on my under eye area, but it can get a little bit more drying than some of the ones that I especially like. I have 2 shades of this one, the shade L200 and M100. I know they make more shades that are in between these two that would probably match me better. Neither of these is a perfect match for me. This one is a little bit dark, this one is a little bit light, which is not a huge deal. I mean, you'll find some of my very favorite concealers may not match me perfectly either, but more the consistency of this one. It can get a little bit heavy. You have to be very careful with the amount of product you use with this one, or it can get a little bit dry and a little bit heavy. What are you doing? Put your jammy pants on your head.
Yay!
That's so silly. I do like this one. I still get a lot of use out of it. I still recommend it, especially as a drugstore concealer. It's just not my most forgiving on the under eye area. Coming in at number 8, this one was kind of a shocker to me because I believe at one point this may have been my #1 concealer, but I am going with the Too Faced Born This Way Multi-Use Sculpting Concealer. Now I do still like this concealer. Do not get me wrong, this is still a great concealer, especially for its value, and that's always been something that I've especially loved about this one. But the more that I've tried different concealers out, both high-end and drugstore, and then gone back to this one, the more I've noticed that this is not as hydrating as I initially thought that it was, or that I have other concealers that are even more hydrating than this one, which I feel like I keep mentioning with every single concealer. You guys are probably like, get to the top 5 already. Again, this is a good one. I especially like this one for the perimeter of my face, but I've just noticed more recently that on my under eye area, while I think it looks good, it doesn't necessarily make my under eyes look bad. It does sometimes feel a little bit drying, and it doesn't particularly make my under eyes look better than what I started with, which is kind of what I'm looking for in a really good under eye concealer. So again, it's one that I'll recommend, especially if you have more normal to oily skin or younger skin. I'd say under 35 or 40. I do love the value of this one. You get a 1/2 ounce, which is so much product, and for the price, I think this is $28. That is amazing. I mean, that's, if we're talking just about value for the amount of product you're getting, that's basically a drugstore price, which is pretty incredible. Still a great concealer, but surprisingly, the more I have tried, the more I've realized this is not quite as good on my delicate and aging under eye area as I initially thought that it was. And keep in mind, it was about 2 years ago that I tried this out. My under eyes have gotten worse in the last 2 years. Let's move on to number 7. Coming in at 7 is an oldie, but still a goodie. It is the Maybelline Instant Age Rewind Concealer. I have had this concealer used this concealer, and not this specific one. I have repurchased this one a few times. Longer than any other concealer in my collection. The fact that it's still coming in near the top 5 is pretty impressive to me. This is a really good concealer especially for your under eye area. Now, I actually don't like this concealer on other areas of my face. This is particularly like an under eye area specific good concealer. That might partly be because the shade of this one is a little bit too light for the perimeter of my face. I know a lot of people that use this everywhere. I don't like and never have liked the packaging of this concealer. I actually wish that it came in either a squeegee tube or a doe foot. I just think it can be a little bit tricky to use, but the formula of this concealer is so incredibly lightweight. It's almost barely there, but it gives really good coverage considering it's almost like using water on your under eyes. I mean, it's so incredibly thin and lightweight, yet somehow it covers up just what you need it to. Very good concealer for the under eyes in particular, or if you're more aged and you have kind of more delicate skin in your under eye area, this is a really, really good one. Ranked at number 6, I'm gonna go with the Dior Forever Skin concealer. I really, really like this concealer. It's actually pretty good value. I mean, it's Dior, which sounds very fancy. I'm not normally one that even browses in the Dior section of Sephora because it's just a brand that sounds a little out of my budget, says the girl who just spent $88 on a Pat McGrath eyeshadow palette. Ugh. But I make an exception with eyeshadow palettes. For concealers, I like a little bit more value. This one was surprisingly more affordable than I was assuming that it would be. I mean, I was surprised when I found this on my Sephora recommended. I was looking at concealers and they recommended some, and towards the top was this one. I was surprised it was only, I think, $36, and you get a lot of product inside here. It has 0.37 ounces. That's a lot. I think next to my Too Faced Born This Way concealer, that might be the most of any of the ones that I see left. And as for the formula, this is just a really good general purpose formula. I like it on my under eye area. I find it to be not too heavy or too cakey. It is pretty nice and hydrating as long as I don't use too much, and I can use it on the perimeter of my face as well. I have the shade 1W. It is a little bit light for the perimeter of my face, I'm finding, as I'm getting a little bit more of like a spring summer tan. But I do really love the formula of this one. It's been one of my most used concealers over the last year or so, and one that I've been very, very impressed with. That brings us to my top 5. These are my very favorite concealers. Each of these concealers has something about it that I think is especially special. Let's just get to it. Coming in at number 5, I'm going with my IT Cosmetics Bye Undereye Concealer. This is a fantastic concealer for the under eye area. It's a very unique concealer formula. I feel like I say this every time I use this concealer or talk about it because it really is. This is a concealer that I feel like a lot of people might use this thinking it was like other concealers and be completely disappointed because this is very different than any other concealer I have ever tried in my entire life. It's very tacky and almost sticky feeling. It's very, very thick. You have to be so careful with the amount of concealer that you use. This is marketed as a full coverage anti-aging waterproof concealer. I've never actually tested out the waterproof claim. I haven't worn this swimming or anything, but when I think of something that's waterproof, I assume that means long wearing, and I do think that this is a long wearing concealer. This is one of the few concealers that remains kind of sticky and tacky, yet somehow, as long as I use the right amount, doesn't seem to settle into any of my creasing in my under eye area. It kind of flexes and moves with the creases, the natural creases in my skin. It's like the Stretch Armstrong of concealers. It kind of comes back to shape after your skin's moved around. Mandy. All I know is that when I use this concealer, I don't need to powder my under eye area at all, which generally I try to avoid because that does make my under eyes look significantly more dry. But for how tacky this is, it never fully sets down to like a powdery finish, yet somehow it doesn't settle. It's kind of a magical product. It is a little trickier to use. I always find this is easier to apply with your finger than with a sponge or a brush. At least that's just me. And it does take some time to really press this into the skin and blend it out. It's not a quick concealer application, but if you have really troublesome under eyes and you don't mind a little bit of patience, a little bit of a learning curve, that can be a great one if you have more aged under eyes. And as for the rest of the face, I can use this on other areas of my face. I really feel like it's more powerful on my under eye area. I don't love using it for the rest of my face because, again, it's a little more time consuming to apply, but it does work. It's just not my preferred one other than just for my under eye area. Ranked at number 4, I am going with the Tarte Shape Tape Ultra Creamy Concealer. I was super, super excited about this concealer when they announced it. I wanted to love the Tarte Shape Tape from the day that everyone started raving about it, and I never could bring myself to love it. It was much too dry for my under eye area, and that was like 4 or 5 years ago when my under eyes were in much better shape than they are right now, and my skin was not as dry as it is right now. So to hear that they were coming out with something that was a little bit more hydrating, a little bit more creamy, I was very excited, and this concealer did not disappoint. I really do love this one. It is really nice and hydrating, but it's not too hydrating at the same time. It actually is a really great consistency and finish. It works great for my under eye area. It also works great on the perimeter of my face. It has great coverage. It's not tacky or oily by any means, but it's also not drying and doesn't kind of get cakey. All around, a really great formula. Pretty good value with this one. I mean, the original is the same. This has 0.33 ounces in it. I use the shade 22N. This seems to be a perfect shade match for me. It's just brightening enough that I can use it on my under eyes, but it's not so bright that I can't still use it on the perimeter of my face. That might change as I get a little bit more tan in the summer, but I've been super impressed with this one. I love reaching for it. It is still a little pricey. I do have some that are even more affordable that I like just as much as this one that we'll get into in a minute, but all around, a really, really good one that I've been pretty impressed with. Top 3, and coming in at number 3, I'm going with the Wet n Wild Incognito Concealer. This concealer has slowly worked its way up the charts for me. I mean, I liked this the first time I used it, but I assumed that this was maybe going to be a little bit too heavy, a little bit too cakey. I think it's the name Incognito. I just assumed, that sounds like a cakey name to me for some reason. But the more I've tried it, the more I've realized, hey, this is actually a really good concealer. I use the shade Light Honey, which seems to be a pretty good match for me. It is a little bit light to use like on my cheeks. It can be a little bit too light, but I can use it like under my nose and on top of my nose, on my under eye area. I do think it works pretty well on the under eyes. I would say you have to be careful with how much you use of this one. If you have troublesome under eyes, start small and add instead of adding too much, like a big swipe and then having to blend it out. Because once you get too much concealer under there, it's almost impossible to fix. I mean, you're going to have to completely redo your makeup. That can be true with just about any concealer. Overall though, this thing has seriously impressed me. It has really great coverage. I think it's pretty hydrating. I would imagine that a lot of people would like this concealer. It would probably work for a lot of people. It really is surprisingly good. For a $3 or $4 concealer, I mean, I don't know that you can beat this formula at the drugstore for $3 or $4. Ranked at number 2, I am going with the Kosas Concealer. I would say if I was to rank my top 2 concealers specifically for the under eyes, it would be this one and the IT Cosmetics. Both of those concealers I feel like had some sort of special property for your under eyes in that they give me the coverage that I need, don't get heavy or cakey or drying, and they also don't settle into my fine lines. This one is, however, a completely different formula than the IT Cosmetics. That one is very thick, very kind of tacky. This one is thin in consistency, really hydrating, beautifully hydrating on the under eyes. I absolutely love this. After using this for the last couple of weeks pretty regularly, I still I'm surprised that this one does not settle in my under eyes when I don't set it down with powder at all. For how hydrating this feels, I initially assumed that this would probably give me some settling towards the end of the day, but I don't notice any settling with this one. Especially, I have this really large crease like right here, right there under my eyes, and then I do have a lot of crow's feet on this outer area right here, and I do find that concealers that are really, really hydrating can sometimes settle. I might be over explaining and confusing you guys. All I can say is that I really do love this, especially for my under eye area. I can use it everywhere, but on the under eyes, there really is something special about this concealer. That leaves us to my number one concealer. Can you guys guess what it is? This is not a new one. This has been a long time favorite, and I am happy and surprised, sort of, to find that it is holding the number one spot. I'm talking about the Revlon Candid Concealer. This concealer is the best multi-purpose concealer that I think I've ever tried. It is so perfect for every area of my face. It works so well under my eyes. It works so well on the perimeter of my face. It is very hydrating. It has great coverage. Never gets cakey, especially using this one with a sponge. I've never had a concealer day that was not just a great concealer day using this concealer. So I use a couple of different shades. I actually have 3 different shades. My 2 favorites are the shade 005. I usually will use just a little dot of this kind of on this socket right there, and then on the rest of my face and in this area right here, I'll use the shade 030. I've been raving about this concealer for over a year now. I still absolutely love it. I have 2 backups, and I'm already considering buying more backups to my backups because these ones are starting to get kind of low. They're so affordable, you guys. If you can find these, depending on where you buy them, I think if you buy them at like a Target or a Walmart, you can find these for around $6 or $7. Whereas if you buy them, I don't think Ulta sells these anymore. If you buy them from like a Walgreens, or I can't remember where else I found these. I'll try and link down below for you guys. Some places you can find these closer to $10, which I actually don't think is a bad price. You do get a lot of product inside here. They don't look like they would have a significantly large amount of product inside here, but they actually have more product even than the Tarte Shape Tape. I'm talking by 0.01 ounces. This is 0.33, this is 0.34. But still, that's pretty good value, especially if you can find these for around $7 a piece. I just continually, every time I go back to these concealers, I wonder why I ever strayed, because they are just so good, so easy to use. Honestly, you could use these with a brush, a sponge, your finger, no matter your preferred form of application. They just work so well. I would imagine these would work for most people. They're not so hydrating that if you have more normal to oily skin, you would find them to be too hydrating, yet even if you have very dry skin, which I do, I find them to be plenty hydrating. I don't know. Sounds so contradictory. I guess I don't know that for sure. All I know is that I love this concealer. I'll just say that. Very favorite. Happy to have this as my number one concealer. Knowing I've tried so many good concealers, I feel like that's saying something, that this is still my number one. Alright you guys, and that is it for my updated ranking my top 10, make that 12 concealers in my collection. These are the very best concealers that I have, with an emphasis on that tricky under eye area. There are a lot of you that have left comments or questions to me asking me what concealer I most recommend for the troublesome under eye. So hopefully this kind of covered that. These are the ones that I most recommend, that I am so happy to have and use. I mean, let's be honest, you guys. Am I really going to use all these concealers before they expire? Time to start putting makeup on 4 times a day. Actually wouldn't mind doing that. But I hope that this video was helpful for you guys. I would love to know from you guys, what concealers did I not mention today? Perhaps they're ones I haven't even tried. Let me know what some of your favorites are down in the comments below. I love trying out concealers. Maybe I'll discover a new one down there. How quickly I forget that I have more than I will ever use. Took like 6 seconds for me to say I want to try another one already. Thank you guys so much for stopping by today. Let me remind you one more time, especially those of you that are new or have not yet subscribed, please be sure to do that before you leave. I'd love to have you guys on board. But that is all for today. I will see you guys all very soon in my next video. Bye. You tricked me. You trying to scare me or something?
Yes, I put my hands in the legs.
Are you a monkey?
And then I put my head on the top.
Oh goodness. Pause. Pause game. That's from Wayne's World.
Oh Mom, look at those.
Let's show everybody this blue. It's insane. What? You can't wear makeup. You're only 4.
No, 6.
You're 6? How did that happen?
I turned 6 for a while and I didn't invite you to my birthday.
You didn't invite me to your party?
Yes.
How did I miss that? I'm so sad. I thought we were best friends.
I just invited Kevin the Minion there.
You had a Minion party?
Yes.
Only Minions were allowed?
Yes. No people.